good afternoon. Welcome to Production Pulse, Industry Week's bi-weekly webcast where we talk about news and information affecting the manufacturing world. I'm Robert Schoenberger, Editor-in-Chief of Industry Week, and this week we are going to be having an editors roundtable discussing some recent coverage and major stories going on that are affecting all of us. So thanks for joining us, and I'm going to start with Scott over here. Scott is the managing editor of Fleet Owner, which is owned by Endeavor Business Media, the same owner of Industry Week. And Scott has been covering Yellow, the trucking company that abruptly shut down this week. So Scott, welcome to the program, and tell us a little bit about what's going on with Yellow and what the impact seems like.
Thank you, Robert. Well, the impact of this trucking company potentially going away completely is pretty profound on a lot of different segments of the trucking industry. As many of you know, Yellow told its union earlier this week, late last week really, that they were going to shut down and go and file for bankruptcy. But the irony of it, of course, is that Yellow itself has not said anything all week. They haven't made their filing. So there's been a lot of behind the scenes palace intrigue, as I'd like to say, about what actually is going on. Of course, it's a serious situation. There are around 30,000 people that could or will and have, starting this week, to lose their jobs. A little context, Yellow is the third largest LTL, less than truckload carrier in the country, and it's the oldest. It's nearly 100 years old. And we, as I said, we've been waiting for some kind of announcement from the company all week long. But since the announcement, the corporate suite at Yellow has basically said nothing publicly. They have been marked by their actions. They've started laying off employees, and they've padlocked literally their terminals all over the country. They have about 300 plus terminals all over the country. And of course, they've cleared their freight channels, and that business has gone elsewhere to other LTLs, as well as to some of the partial shipping companies like UPS and FedEx. UPS, of course, just averted a major strike themselves. The immediate shock of Yellow, this Yellow situation's been on the freight market. Executives during earnings calls this week have said, when they've been reporting their second quarter results, that they've picked up large chunks of Yellow's business. But they've also been careful to note that they're not feasting off the carcass of the company itself, and they've also noted that they're charging shippers more than Yellow did. So that's an interesting situation. There's also a situation with analysts telling us that Yellow would likely file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which of course is a complete liquidation of its assets. But they've looked to get some what is called debtor in possession funding from a company called Apollo Global Management. And usually that type of financing is associated with a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is not a dissolution. It is a restructuring or reorganization. So there's a lot of speculation as to whether Yellow in some form might survive or might be purchased by one of their many investors, or might continue to exist in some form. The history with the union, of course, has been checkered. The union, they actually sued their union a couple of weeks ago for $130 million in a U.S. district court in Kansas for allegedly interfering in their latest restructuring, which is called One Yellow. And then after that, they told the union as well that they were going to miss pension and benefits payments for July and August. So the union turned around and, of course, threatened to strike by July 24th. But the fund administrator swooped in and said that they were going to give a 30-day extension on the benefits. So benefits and pension and healthcare benefits were not taken away immediately from Teamsters employees. Yellow has about 22,000 employees who are unionized. So
we're seeing a lot of concern from the manufacturing side again. Of, we have so many people dealing with just-in-time inventory and trying to. Do they count on yellow coming back, or is this? It sounds like also that a lot of people change their shippers when these concerns started coming to light. Is this having a big ripple effect throughout the industry?
Well, Yellow is going to go bankruptcy. It's just a question of which form of bankruptcy they choose to follow. All of these indicators seem to say that Yellow is still trying to survive in some form, or at least trying to make for a more graceful exit than they showed their employees and to the media this week. Um, there's been some interesting investor activity in the past week or so. MFN and Partners, which was previously a smaller time investor in Yellow, bumped its ownership stake up to 42% this week. And that's the largest slice by far of any other investor in that company. And MFN, of course, is an investor in XPO. So could there be some involvement by XPO in this? All this has taken place in the background that since it was announced that Yellow would be filing for bankruptcy, their stock has gone up by as much as 25 to 30%.
Not the typical response the market gives to that kind of news.
No, not the typical response at all. And also, so there's cash there. There's also cash from the fact that Yellow also announced that they were going to try to sell their third-party logistics arm, which is arguably one of their more successful companies. So, again, lots of palace intrigue about what's going to happen with this company. Chapter 11, tumultuous history with their union. Could this be a thumb in the nose to the union? I mean, the union president did call the company a deadbeat company, not just 1 week ago. So there's a lot of implications for the shippers and a lot of implications for jobs in the trucking industry. The union itself pledged some placement services for its members to find trucking jobs elsewhere. Of course, they would prefer that they were other union trucking jobs. And American Trucking Associations also has emerged with some help and placement help for jobs elsewhere in the industry. So there are a lot of ripples from this one, and we've had this story and the UPS story going on simultaneously. So it's been a busy news week for fleet owner the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. It's interesting stuff. Like I said, the supply chain is of utmost interest to the manufacturing world, and seeing these big changes, it's something to worth tracking.
Yep. Tune in to Fleet Owner next week.
Great. And let's shift gears a little bit to Dave Blanchard. Dave is involved with IndustryWeek. He handles a lot of supply chain material for us. He's also the editor-in-chief over at EHS Today, which is environmental health and safety news. And one of the big things they're following is this massive heat wave we're still seeing throughout the Southwest and the South, and triple digits for 34 days in a row in Phoenix. What are companies doing to keep people functioning and safe in these kinds of environments?
All right, so let's put a little perspective on this. It's August, and it's going to be hot. It's in the United States, it's summertime. So I did a little quick research as far back as I could look into the EHS Today archives on the web. And we go back to 1999. And in 1999, we were running stories about what companies should do to protect their workers during the heat. So this is not by any means, this just kind of happened, breaking news story. It's hot in the summer. What is, I guess, how do I put this delicately? There seem to be some companies in the United States, as well as throughout the world, who are focused more on productivity than on keeping their workers safe. I realize this is an astonishing story to break right here on your production pulse, but yeah, some companies they pay lip service to protecting their workers. Let's put it that way. Anyways, what OSHA has been doing, they haven't yet gotten an all new regulation solidified, but they've been working on it for a couple of years, trying to codify and put into practice, and then start regulating it with inspections and the regular OSHA procedures to make sure that all employers are protecting their workers. Now, that doesn't just mean people working outside in the summertime. It could be somebody working indoors who are wearing really heavy equipment, protective equipment, protecting them from something falling on their head or something like that. But also, if it's very warm in a warehouse or something like that, and you're wearing the proper equipment to protect yourself from something hitting you, are you also putting yourself at risk for just overheating, overexertion, if the warehouse isn't properly ventilated or if there's not air conditioning? There's kind of a code word for protecting workers. It's called water, rest, shade. So in other words, companies are expected to provide their employees cool water, especially if they're working outside or if they're working in a hot environment. They're expected to give them, I think it's like 5 minutes per hour of just break time. If you're feeling hot, you should take the initiative to get out of the sun, take the initiative to drink some water, take the initiative just to let your body cool down. These are all great ideas in theory. In practice, sometimes they don't pan out the way you would expect. There was a case fairly recently, maybe the last year or so, of OSHA wondering or issuing citations against the United States Postal Service. So it's one branch of the government kind of coming down on another branch of the government, saying that your postal carriers aren't being adequately protected from the heat, because a lot of postal carriers even today are still walking their routes rather than in an air-conditioned truck or anything like that. Anyways, it turns out that OSHA was told to back off a little bit from a commission. The reason behind that was that maybe it's ironic, but the USPS was in such financial difficulties that it would put an undue hardship on the Postal Service to follow all of the OSHA regulations to the letter. Well, they're not even OSHA regulations. They're OSHA suggestions or OSHA protections. Some state OSHAs, I'm talking about federal OSHAs. Some state OSHAs are a little bit more advanced, perhaps, on that pathway to getting all their workers or all the companies to protect their workers a little bit better. It's one of those issues that it's not ever going to go away. I guess there is the impetus behind it right now is, it seems to be hotter than it had been historically, depending on how you judge how hot it really is, but definitely in the summertime when things get hot. The one kind of a new thing, at least in terms of media perspective, but also just public perception, are all these wildfires. I live in the Midwest, as do many of us on this call. You just look outside. Many times this summer, it's just hazy. It's kind of, we've seen pictures of New York City being orange because the skies are just clouded over with wildfire smoke from Canada working their way down here. So there's no OSHA regulation on wildfire, but there are OSHA has come out and said, hey, we don't have a regulation on this right now, but we highly suggest you protect your workers, bring them in from outside. If the weather alert says that the number is over 100 or 200 in some cases, it got just crazy high in some areas of the country. The wildfire air quality index just crazy. So that's not necessarily heat, but it's definitely environmental conditions that are exacerbated by being out in the heat. So you can't breathe very well anyways with the smoke out there. And under the conditions of the heat, it's like, people are just not not doing well, you got to bring them inside, or you got to give them water, you got to give them shade. It's good. It's getting to the point. We're not at that point yet, but OSHA is really kind of focusing in on it. Doug Parker spoke recently at an event for safety professionals, and he just said, this heat advisory is going to soon become an actual OSHA regulation. So companies, you need to get on board. There's a whole list of things. Specific industries are being targeted right now for the Industry Week audience in particular. If they're involved in any kind of activity that involves outdoor work or even indoor work where you're not properly ventilating or air conditioning your facility, you need to pay really close attention to that, because OSHA is hiring more inspectors, so they are going to be coming after you.
Yeah, I've seen there still are unair conditioned factories in the U.S. Fewer now than there seem to have been in the past. The machines themselves generate so much heat that it's been very hard to run an unair conditioned plant in some parts of the country. But they still exist, and especially when you look at the manufacturing growth in areas like Phoenix, where they are getting such huge temperature swings, it's going to be more of an issue. It sounds like. And I guess it's also the sustained level, the really long periods of days of triple digits. Yeah, it's hot in the summer. You extend that 3 or 4 more days without that kind of break. It's that much harder to deal with. So. Dave, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. And let's shift over to Anna. Anna Smith recently covered a story for us on the workforce side of things, looking at women in manufacturing and the experiences a lot of women in leadership positions had. Anna, can you just give us some of the highlights of that piece, that study that came out recently?
Sure. So the report is titled, in her own words, "Breaking the Glass Ceiling is Good for Business," and it's by the Manufacturers Alliance Foundation. So they collected a lot of their data from surveys, surveying both men and women, but they also did a lot of first-person interviews, I think more than 24 first-person interviews. So the report has a lot of great, not only just data and statistics, but quotes and thoughtful insights from women in the C-suite and just women leaders in manufacturing. So one of the biggest takeaways I had from it is 74% of manufacturers don't believe their company has a fair number of women in leadership roles compared to men. And I think that kind of is just like overall encompassing the entire issue. There was a lot of talk about how there is this statistics that says prior to COVID, the World Economic Forum was saying women were going to reach parity with men globally in about 60 years. And after COVID, that has been pushed to more than 130 years. So that is obviously just a huge, more than double the amount of years we were seeing before. And so a lot of insights can be drawn from this. Breaking down the further issues, another statistic, when asked, do you believe the manufacturing industry has made significant progress in providing equal opportunities and pay to women in the past 5 years? Only 38% of women responded yes. And I also think it's interesting to add that 82% of men responded yes. I think that gives a good indication of maybe how your position can really impact your perspective. The report goes on to outline some disadvantages, summarizes a bunch of disadvantages they have seen. In terms of advocacy and how women are trying to move up in these organizations, break the glass ceiling, as the title suggests. One statistic says 33% of women say they do not have colleagues advocating for them, and 59% said they lack mentoring and resources for career growth, compared to only 19% of men. So there does seem to be some sort of, at least sort of divide in the perception of resources. Also, one statistic that really stuck out to me was 52% of women disagreed with the statement, "My company promotions are not biased based by gender or sex," and just 22% of men disagreed. So even any amount of disagreement for that sort of question is, I would say, unacceptable. But for more than half of these women in leadership to believe that company promotions are biased based by gender shows their sort of their feelings and how they, even if some of the other higher ups don't see it that way, there has to be, when more than half of women are agreeing, there has to be some sort of taking a step back to look at your processes, and maybe recognizing your own biases. Another sort of
Sorry to cut you off here, but this kind of ties into some other reporting that you and Laura and a few other people on our staff have done, looking at the need for people in manufacturing right now. This has been identified by Manufacturers Alliance and some other groups as an underserved market, and reaching out to women, recruiting women, especially into these leadership positions, could go a long way to closing the massive number of jobs needed through most manufacturing operations right now.
Yes, definitely. And I think there has been increasing outreach to women, even girls who maybe in the future want to pursue some sort of career in manufacturing, whether that's skilled trades or something in the STEM fields. But even when we have women coming into these workplaces who maybe do have a lot of experience under their belt, they still feel as if they're not being treated equally, which, if we want more women to kind of fill these gaps, we need to make sure that we're obviously creating an inclusive environment where they feel not only welcomed, but supported, and they have advocacy from their colleagues and things like that. So what the whole report kind of takes out of this is it all comes down to the businesses or companies' intentions. There was one quote within the report that said, "It's getting more women into manufacturing isn't just going to happen on its own. It's going to take work. It's going to take actual care from the people who already are in manufacturing." Statistically, a lot of the men who run manufacturing. And one of the sort of takeaways at the end also was there was this quote that says, "Probably the largest area of disagreement among the interviews we conducted surrounded the question of female identity. At the risk of massive oversimplification, it boiled down to, don't be too masculine, don't be too feminine, just be human. If there was any doubt that women are still walking the tightrope, our interviews confirmed it," which I think really sums up not only women's experiences in manufacturing, but women's experiences in professional careers of any sort of confused messaging. So clearly there's a lot of work to be done on the side of actual tangible resources, but also on the sort of environment that women are facing going into these careers. But it also ended on a positive note, with many of the respondents talking about how they've been seeing more confidence and empowerment in the younger women of today. So I think we can really look forward to the future as we open up this field to more women and other groups.
And clearly the need is there, because we have so many plants still reporting not being able to find the people they need. So thank you so much, Anna. And last but not least, Laura Poutre, who covers a lot of leadership topics for us, and just did a fantastic profile recently of an executive at U.S. Steel who really walked us through what that company is doing to really tie sustainability into its growth plans and its future. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about the executive and what you learned about U.S. Steel from that interview?
Sure, yeah. So I want to say first, what U.S. Steel is doing, it's something that it's a good business model. And it's something that they need to do around sustainability because, European steel companies are ahead of us as far as innovation around sustainable steel. And there are other U.S. companies that are maybe where U.S. Steel is at, or even a little bit ahead of them in their sustainability initiatives. So, U.S. Steel, a few years ago, they had a chief strategy officer, Rick Freuhoff, who had been is just been in steel for most of his career, and was the strategy officer at the company, and they combined his title with chief sustainability officer, because they see sustainability and strategy now going forward as intertwined. Steel produces about 8% of the emissions globally of greenhouse gases. So making a dent in those emissions can make a big difference, and it has to be done quickly. As you can see already, we are seeing the effects of climate change. So their strategy is to by 2030 reduce their emissions by 20%, and they are on target for that, reaching that perhaps ahead of schedule by 2030, and then by 2050 becoming a net zero company. So some of the ways that they are doing that is through sustainable steel produced in electric mini mills. So the blast furnace process produces a lot of, carbon emissions are part of that process. So, recycling high quality steel using electricity can, go to a certain, can reduce emissions to a certain extent. The problem is that, there's a limited supply of high quality scrap that can be used for recycling. But about 25% of the world's steel could be produced that way. So they have a mini mill in Big River, Arkansas, that they acquired, and then they are doubling its capacity next year. So that will go to some lengths to reach their 20% goal. And they, have some big customers for this. It is a good business model because, like, the automakers want to reduce their emissions as well. They want sustainable steel. So, they've got some deals with GM and other big OEMs to supply them with, sustainable steel for some of their vehicles.
And there's some product mix changes needed there as well, weren't there? You mentioned in the story that, for instance, steels for electric vehicles are more specialized and have different makeups.
Right.
And so even though that's not how the steel is generated, but the product itself is part of that sustainability picture.
Yeah, they see an in the market for, there's a lot of attention given to battery cells for electric vehicles, and they're building new plants. So U.S. Steel is focusing on the electric motor that needs conduction, to power the electric vehicle, and it needs specialty steel. So at that Big River plant, they are producing another type of sustainable steel that will be used in electric motors.
That's great information. It's a lot of interesting things going on, a lot of different directions. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Scott from Fleet Owner. Thank you, Dave from EHS Today, and Laura and Anna from Industry Week. Appreciate your time today for everyone who's watching, and please join us in 2 weeks for the next Production Pulse from Industry Week. Have a great afternoon.
Bye. Thanks so much.